it's me, Jay, your GM. I use he, him, and they, them.
And they them sometimes, which is great. Which is great for you. I love that for you. I'm your heir. I use he, him, and this is Jay on air.
It is, and this time I brought the talking point because I've been feeling like a little inadequate. I've been feeling like maybe I haven't been pulling my weight in this team up here. So I thought I should bring some talking points for once. And of course, you spent last episode infuriating our very kind and loyal Draw Steel fan audience. But today we're going to talk about Daggerheart. I'm going to put a dagger in the heart of that game. Specifically,
slow down. Don't spoilers.
Yeah. Specifically, we've had a long conversation about narrative versus non-narrative games. We've had this conversation routinely for the last 7 years.
I was gonna say, I don't think we've had another conversation more because it's my favorite conversation.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know if it's one of yours. I think it's probably cracked the top 10 at least.
Oh yeah, sure. I like thinking about games, and this is a pretty interesting divide. So we recently had what I feel is our most productive version of this conversation, where we cracked a few interesting insights, and it was around the game Daggerheart. So of course, I don't think I have to explain to anybody watching this show what Daggerheart is, but I will anyway because that's my responsibility as a YouTuber. I have to explain obvious things to people who already know. So Daggerheart is a game produced by Critical Role. It is their RPG system that they don't use for their show for some reason. And they are a set of rules that they have produced through their Darrington Press arm. And it's basically their stab at a D&D-like, but more in the vein of how they play, except that they're not playing it.
It hurts every time.
My big problem with it, my big contention, my point is that Daggerheart wants to be both a narrative system and a non-narrative system, and it is worse for the trying to be both. And I don't think that is an inherent property of trying to be both, because there is another game, which I showed you this week, Quest, which I think sits more comfortably in the middle between a narrative game and a non-narrative game. Calling these two types of games narrative and non-narrative is confusing and weird and
misnomer.
Bad. Yes. Right? And so we had a debate about what is the difference between these two games, and what are we even calling these two types of games?
I think really the crux of it is we've both been trying to define these things, these two types of games in the TTRPG space, but coming at it from different perspectives, because I tend to like narrative games and you tend to like whatever we're going to end up calling non-narrative games. I think you said it best when you're like, narrative games really kind of just got in and stole the best word for it, because you can tell a narrative, you can tell a story in any TTRPG system. Yeah. So why is narrative game, definitional of these, more rules light, more, offering greater agency to players? And
I wouldn't say agency, I would say authorial power.
Authorial, yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant. Locus of control, I think, is something we're going to come to, in terms of control of the narrative at any given point in the story.
Simulationist. That was the one that you kind of got to in our last conversation, which I have some beef with a couple of times, because D&D is not trying to simulate anything. It is D&D as an engine is not a simulation of any reality that actually exists. A simulation is inherently something that is trying to create something that exists, or like create an environment, or at least take something that doesn't exist and create a world where it theoretically could exist. I don't think that that's really what D&D is trying to do, because D&D is creating an engine in which you can play, in which there are bounds and constraints, but it is not trying to model something with a great deal of accuracy or put a lot of imposition on you to like model out certain behaviors or interactions. And it's not even looking for consistency necessarily. There's a lot of inconsistency in how D&D is run, which is part of the problem sometimes. But yeah, so I didn't like simulationists. That it personally didn't work for me. You came to like combat versus combatless game, which I thought was fascinating.
Combat is distinct versus combat is no different from anything else, because like these crunchier, like rules heavy games, and I went with simulationist because it comes from the DNA of D&D is wrapped up in wargaming, where it originally originated from, and those are simulationists. It's meant to try to simulate these large scale historical battles and eventually battles from fantasy media and fantasy stories and whatnot, which eventually led to D&D. But you are right that I think it's become something that at best I could say it's trying to simulate a world, but you are right in that it's not simulating it particularly accurately.
Yeah. So okay. So again, getting back to the combat versus combatless point.
Yeah.
This actually stumped me for a while. You said this, and it activated a landmine in my brain that really blocked me for a long time, and I really had to think about it. I don't know if you noticed, but there was a gap in the conversation around that time where I was just really thinking about like.
Yeah, it was a great few minutes where I thought I'd won.
Yeah, because it was true. Because it looks true at the very least. Like when you look at these narrative games, they don't have a specific like. Okay, roll initiative. We are now in initiative. The rules have changed. We are operating under a different set of rules now during this time.
The fighting mini game has commenced. Yeah,
exactly. And like you have games like Blades in the Dark, right? That doesn't have a initiative system. And you have games like Powered by the Apocalypse and all these other games where they just don't care about initiative. Even Critical Role's game Daggerheart, which we're looking at now, the Spotlight Tracker, does not have hard and fast initiative rules. There's no like roll initiative in Daggerheart. It has very loosey-goosey initiative rules. And so it is kind of a commonality between these games that they don't tend to have hard and fast initiative rules. But I really thought about it, right? And I thought about if I made a narrative game, which used the systems of a narrative game, and I put in an initiative tracker in it, and I had a hard and fast initiative game, would that then be like D&D? If in every other situation it was a narrative game, and even in combat the abilities operated like narrative game rules, but it had a strict initiative tracker, would that then be like D&D? And I thought, no, it wouldn't. Because there's something else that's different. It's not just the existence of initiative changes fundamentally the type of game it is. The big differentiator between these two types of games is ultimately third pillar and no third pillar. Like 2-pillar games and 3-pillar games, right? And these pillars, in this case, I'm not referring to the pillars of play that D&D would understand, but I'm referring to authorial power. In a narrative game, there are 2 pillars of authorial power. There is the game master, and there's the players. And they both have authorial power. And each game's going to have slightly different levels, like slightly different, tilt on that scale. Whereas in D&D-like games, there are 3 pillars. There's the game master, there are the players, and there are the rules. And the rules exist as a third pillar of authorial power in the game. I get called the dungeon happener by my players sometimes lately, because I will say stuff like, it's not my fault you're in this situation. and they'll be like, then whose fault is it? Because you and us are the only ones here. So are you saying it's our fault? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just the chance of the dice. It's the way the things worked out. It's how the numbers rolled out. It's how the game played out. And it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's just the way that the situation occurred, because I am operating under the assumption that there is a third pillar out there that I am working within or with and alongside. And it's not super strong. I would say I, as the GM, am obviously significantly stronger than the third pillar. I have a lot more say. I put the enemies in the dungeon. I created the dungeon. I created the situation. I put you in the situation. But I do surrender some power to what we call the dice, right? To random chance, to the mechanics of the game, right? Oh, this enemy has a resistance to the main ability your character does, and now you're just going to have a bad time all night because you can't do anything because this guy has a resistance. But that third pillar exists for a reason. It exists to create something outside of me and the players that complicates a situation in interesting ways. When I was looking this up online, I actually came across an Alexandrian article, which was role-playing games versus storytelling games. And so his argument is that those third pillar games are role-playing games, where you're playing the role of a specific character. Narrative games are then storytelling games, where it is your job to tell an interesting story with your friends. That this
It's
is
so interesting. I was literally reading about Once Upon a Time today because Dale Kingsmill brought it up in a podcast I was listening to. Yeah.
Yeah, so this Alexandrian article I thought had a really interesting division here that I thought was actually kind of like true as well. So I call the difference third pillar. They can call it role-playing versus storytelling. Either way, the point is that we have terms now for these games. We can understand what the difference is and what the objective is of each of these games, right? So let's say your game is a role-playing game or a third pillar game. Then the purpose of the game is to be the third pillar, outside of the player, outside of the GM, that can support play, that can create interesting scenarios. The third pillar creates the monsters, by and large, and creates the rules for creating monsters. The third pillar creates abilities for the players. The third pillar creates spells and features and feats and all these other things. Like, that's all in the third pillar. It's all created there, outside of the GM. Storytelling games, you kind of create all that stuff together. Obviously, a storytelling game will have, like, moves for your characters or something like that.
Like a Powered by the Apocalypse game, yeah, well, for sure.
I mean, even Daggerheart has moves.
It does, this is true.
So these games have moves where you take a specific action and then you see out the consequences. But those moves are highly flexible, highly changeable, highly interpretable by design, so that you can figure out how to apply those to various different kinds of situations, so that even though you only get a few moves, you have a ton of narrative power to shape those moves to be whatever you need it to be. All that groundwork out of the way, we can now begin to ask the question of, like, Daggerheart. What is it, and why is it that it struggles, in my opinion? Ultimately, I think it is this, like, sitting in the middle between a storytelling game and a role-playing game, is that those two things have different outcomes, right? A role-playing game is about being in a specific role, a specific character, being that character, and having an impact on a world that is kind of like uncaring, unfeeling. It is an outside thing to you. Obviously it does care because it's powered by your GM, who loves you very much. But the world is like, it feels a bit harsh, a bit uncaring, a bit like difficult. It's dangerous to do stuff because things can have real consequences, and not just narrative consequences, but like consequences that interrupt the narrative, that disrupt the narrative, that destroy the narrative of your character's story. In the most extreme examples, we have OSR games where you can just die because you rolled bad.
Yeah. Yep.
And then in D&D games, it's obviously much lighter than that. You have to roll bad a couple times before you die. But then in storytelling games, you're never going to just die because you rolled bad, because that would be a bad story. But you can create a situation that is untenable for your character anymore, and then the narrative resolution for that becomes death or loss or failure or whatever, and then that becomes the story that you told together. But, like, if you're trying to do both, it's really, really tricky. Because the narrative beats that a storytelling game relies on are not always simpatico with the randomness that a role-playing game relies on.
Well, when we're getting back to this locus of control thing, right? Like, narrative games, because the rule set, and when we say, like, third pillar, like, it's not that there aren't rules in narrative games. It's just that those rules primarily are there for telling you who is in control of the narrative at this moment. Is it the game master, or whatever the term the system's going to use for it? Is it the player? Very few narrative games have like hard and fast outcomes for results that aren't putting the narrative spotlight, to use the Daggerheart term, on either the game master or the players. Whereas I think in these more this is part of why I was calling it simulationist, in that there's this third part, right? This third pillar, you're calling it, which is external to both parties, and it oftentimes tells you directly how a thing is, right? Oh, this creature is immune to this damage. Oh, this weapon does this much damage. It's not up to the player or the GM. Those things are hard and fast in the rules. You need like a locus of control that switches between the game master and the players in a narrative game in order to have a fair shake at telling your story. But in a more role-playing game, there needs to be control on the game master side so they can set stakes. And if you give players too much narrative control, you can't set stakes for things like a combat, which is one of the major things where stakes are highest in these types of games. And I think that's where it's at odds. Like even 5e, I would argue like the skill system in 5e is more of a narrative system, even though the GM is the one interpreting the players' roles and whatnot. It's a lot more loosey-goosey. There's a lot less, direct. The rules are telling you exactly how to adjudicate a given skill check. It's very much scenario and context dependent. But you get into a fight, and if you want to, challenge your players, you need hard and fast rules that say you have this much HP, they have this much HP, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's interesting. That's one of the things I find interesting about Daggerheart, because Daggerheart has such a weird mixture of the two. Like, the way that their combat system works is that there is the spotlight, which is shared among players. There is no hard and fast rule about what you can do on your turn. There's no hard and fast rule about, like, how much you can move on your turn, or, like, if you could move twice and then attack or anything like that. There's nothing that says what you can do. It's an optional rule to give your players 3 action tokens that they can spend on each turn. That's an optional rule. It's not a hard... It's like, not the core rule. By the core rule, you just get the spotlight on you and you do something, and then when you have decided that it is done being your turn, you hand the spotlight to someone else. Or if you roll with fear or you fail to hit, then the spotlight moves to the enemies. But, like, theoretically it is within the bounds of the rules for you to just go up, punch an enemy until he dies, and then walk away. Like, it could... If
you keep succeeding with hope, and the DM has no fear to spend, technically... There's a chance your side just decimates the other side with no chance for them to ever retort. Yeah.
So obviously the intention of the game is like, don't do that. Hey guys, be cool. Be cool with each other and play the game in a fair way. But there's no like hard and fast rules. So if a GM looks at this and wants to run it, like, they kind of have to go to the optional rule and implement that if they want it to be quote unquote fair. Or if they are playing just loosey-goosey with the basic rules, then everybody just kind of has to agree that, like, basically they create their own version of these optional rules, where they're like, oh, I did a thing, that's probably my turn. And it's like, that's just a choice that everybody's making to agree with each other that that's true. But the game has 3 armor classes. It has, your minor, severe, and major damage thresholds. I put those in the wrong order.
No, it has 4 armor classes, because it also has evasion, which is, do you get hit at all? And then you have to compare against the damage thresholds once you've taken damage to see how much damage you take.
And you have 2 different HP bars, because you have your stress bar and you have your HP bar, and once your stress bar is full, it starts becoming HP damage. And so, like, that's a system that's sort of like how it works in Blades in the Dark, which I think that the designers of this game very much read Blades in the Dark and took a lot of ideas from there, because there's a lot of Blades in the Dark in the system. Very stringent mechanical stuff in this game, like a tactical RPG would have. like HP bars and stress bars and thresholds of damage and evasion and these sorts of things that you wouldn't normally see in a narrative game. And then, like, the abilities kind of play to the
All the
classic...
domain cards, yeah.
Yeah, they kind of play to the classic way that, like, a D&D character ability would sometimes work. And sometimes they're, like, narrative moves, and sometimes they are, like, specific combat abilities. Sometimes, like, domain cards you pick are just, like, I get +1 to evasion. And it's, like... That's purely a mechanical benefit that has no narrative weight at all, but it occupies the same slot of pick as picking a more narrative ability would have. So it feels like I am giving up narrative control for mechanical power, and therefore is mechanical power equivalent to narrative control, or is it not? And now I'm getting confused. Like, the game is starting to feel weird. Is the spotlight tracker optional or not? It says optional tool spotlight tracker. I don't believe it is, because when you get into combat, you're going to want to know, well, what can I do on my turn? Because our asses are getting kicked. We're dying here. People are, like, dropping like flies, and I want to maximize my turn. And, like, there are specific things I can do. How many of those am I allowed to do? And the GM will have to make a call.
Yeah, I've played about, I think, 2 or 3 one-shots so far. And I think for an experience table, and this is maybe my main concern with Daggerheart, but we'll get to it in general. In our table, we all just fell into that routine of, well, yeah, I did a thing, and, you know, I rolled successfully with hope, so someone else take a turn. Like, I'm not going to keep going. I could, I guess, by the rules in general, but I don't want to do that because I want someone else to have the spotlight, because I don't want to be a spotlight hog, because that is my inner bard's great tendency. I could see if you had a set of players who were more motivated by game mechanics than, you know, sharing that spotlight around, that's going to be the perspective by which they come into this, right? Is they're going to be like, well, how does initiative work? And you're like, well, it's kind of a little bit loosier.
I wonder if you even need more mechanically focused players. My thinking is just that, like, eventually in this game, the rubber is going to hit the road at some point. You're going to get into combat that is either poorly balanced, or the rolls have just been super against you, or the storyteller, whatever, is so chalked up on fear before the battle starts that he's just able to murder you, interrupting your turn, multiple turns, spotlighting the same enemy, just hammers you really hard and puts you on the back foot. And when the rubber hits the road like that, players begin to look to their options. They begin to really hardcore look at what they can do on their turn, what they can do in their character sheet. Role-playing games bring that out in you because that's the way that the games are designed around. They're designed around optimizing your character, using it as best as you can to get the positive result. Narrative games usually don't have to deal with that, because in narrative games, it's usually clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, in storytelling games, it's usually clear, like, I can do one thing on my turn. I can take an action, and then when my action is done, it moves to the next person. And in a storytelling game, it is usually clear. But I don't think it is clear here. And that's fine, like, you know, that's just one minor thing. But it's also, like, you have so many different kinds of armor in this game that each has specific mechanical implications. Some of them give you evasion, some of them take away evasion, some of them give you bonuses to things and others don't. You have so many different kinds of weapons. All of them have bonuses. It's like weapon masteries in D&D. Some of them have special abilities that they can use, some of them don't. So picking your weapon is very important. You have community, which gives you certain abilities. You have ancestry, which gives you certain abilities. You have your class, which gives you certain abilities. Like, it's a pretty mechanically complex game. It is a pretty hefty, mechanically complex game. But the outcome of all that is something that is less tactical than D&D. And we've even said D&D itself is not particularly tactical in reality. Like, you go to something like Draw Steel, and that's much more, like, tactically rewarding, tactically satisfying, because there's more interplay with the terrain and with pushing and shoving and with, like, incentive to use your different abilities and things like that. You'd have to correct me on this because you've actually played the game more than me. But, like, it's not like you got a ton of character abilities on your character sheet, right?
Nope.
So there's not a lot to choose between on your turn. Like,
Yeah, you're primarily using a lot of the same abilities, or you're trying to do the narrative thing, which has mechanical benefits. Like I think the one thing you liked from this was the team
combo
up
attack.
maneuver,
Yep.
right? The combo attack, which lets you roll a crap ton of dice to almost guarantee you're going to exceed the severe damage threshold of whatever you're hitting. But you and another player get to spend resources together to go in on this one big roll, and you choose how the various abilities you're putting forward combine together to do a chrono trigger like double tech kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of this highlights what I think is the tricky bit, which is and it's why I laughed so hard when you were saying, oh, that they aren't playing their own game. They've gone back to D&D, because I think they have, over the years of running their campaigns, found a niche that really works for them in playing D&D, which is they were playing a little bit looser. I don't know that any of them were necessarily. I think as they've played, they've gotten more strategic and more tactical, but I think they will definitely still go for the dramatic moment, even in a combat scene.
Oh, sure.
I literally just saw a scene of Caleb and Not like pulling a scam where one of them pretends to die, and they did that through the mechanics of a combat. Ultimately, I've heard Daggerheart described as D&D the way you thought D&D would be played when someone described it to you for the first time. And I think that is the way the Critical Role folks tend to play. So they've designed a system meant to be in keeping with that play style, to speak to a fan base that's used to that play style. But because that play style was a bunch of, I think, folks that would have maybe been more comfortable in a more narrative storytelling system, starting in these tactical systems, they've kind of come to this weird middle ground in Daggerheart, where you are right that there is, it feels a little at odds with itself at times.
They came to a middle ground, and I think that there is a way to make a middle ground that would have been exciting and interesting and really good. And I just don't think that they got there all the way. And I think it also would have been just easier to teach, easier to learn, and less complicated to run. I think that that's probably what people were looking for with this game. I mean, obviously I don't speak for anybody and I don't know what people are looking for with this game, but and it seems like it's very successful, so clearly people...
I was going to say, I think they actually did deliver the kind of game the Critter fan base is looking for. I just think that game, if you are someone who likes kind of the poles of storytelling game, narrative game, whatever we want to call it, like I do, or more tactical, crunchier, rules heavy systems like you do, if that's where your heart kind of lies, this middle thing is maybe going to be a too far stretch for either of those sides. Like, it's hard to come to that middle when both sides that are more polarized are thinking, well, you're too far apart for me, right?
So that is a very generous way to phrase this, I suppose you could say. Like, ultimately what you're kind of saying here is that this game is the happy middle for the fans. I don't necessarily know that that's true, because success does not necessarily mean that it did a great job. It just means it was successful, right? Something... I think it'd be successful that isn't very good. MCU movies exist. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow, the hottest takes.
I'm joking.
Well, after Endgame, it's all been downhill.
I think that, like, just because something is popular doesn't necessarily mean that it is well made. Like, for a lot of people, this is their second RPG, right? For a lot of people, this is their first attempt at something other than D&D, because it has the Critical Role brand attached to it. I think you have to play a lot of stuff and read a lot of stuff and think very hard about stuff to form opinions about stuff. Like, the more movies you watch, you're going to get more opinionated about what you like in movies, because you're going to know what you like, and you're going to have a deeper understanding of why you like what you like. And so it is easier.
Your contention is, welcome to the guy who's only seen Boss Baby RPG.
I think that there is something to be said that the fact that Critical Role is extremely popular and extremely beloved, and people are very excited about the franchise and the community because it is a very warm and welcoming, inviting community, and because of that, they might be more lenient necessarily than they might be with other game systems. I think that Daggerheart plays differently than D&D. I don't know that it's better or worse. To me it's kind of a lateral move. I don't know that it goes up or down here. There are narrative or storyteller games that are more focused on just that don't even bother with all this complicated armor and weapon and class and stuff. That doesn't even really bother with any of that, and goes further in the direction that they are in, and I think that they would like it more. And I think that so this is, maybe it's a great second game. I don't think it's necessarily a great game. I think it lacks a lot of finesse and I think it honestly Draw Steel made a choice about what it was going to be, right? Draw Steel chose to be tactical, and it went all in on that. And Matt's opinion was, I don't think people are right, that people are intimidated by complicated games. I think people are wrong about that. I think there's a market for people who like games like this, and I'm going to stake my whole company to that decision. And we'll find out if he was right with the new Patreon that's coming up in December. But I don't think that this game ever made a solid choice about what it believes gamers want out of a game. I think it is a bunch of compromises and in the form of a game. And that's okay. It's still a decent game, but I think it could have been way better if it had just picked a lane and gone for it.
Yeah, in the time I've played it, I've definitely enjoyed the narrative parts of it, coming close to death. The death rolls in this are very much if you think this is it and you want to go out in a blaze of glory, there's a way to do it. If you want to, 50-50 shot, see if you come back in a big heroic move or just die there dead on the ground, you can do it. I do wonder how long those will sustain drama as they become, the common thing that you do across, the times that you eat shit in the middle of a fight in a Daggerheart campaign.
Yeah, we saw a really good example of a really bad combat for the players in the latest Ack Inc. episode, where they maxed out Crawford's fear meter. He could not gain fear anymore because they completely maxed him out.
Which is so in keeping with Ack Inc., honestly. No, guys, being fuck-ups here is not something you want to lean into.
Surprisingly, Ack Inc. is playing Daggerheart.
Yes, they are.
Critical Role not playing it, Ack Inc. is playing it.
It's a wild time to be in the fandom. I did feel like when I was playing, I was like, I have all these options, and ultimately I kept kind of using the same one that I thought was the coolest. I am your shield to rush in and take a blow for my but that was pretty much, it was that and a basic attack was all I was ever really doing. And so I can see how it was for those who enjoy tactical combat with such limited options, I feel like I'm not really getting to diversify. And for people who are more narratively focused in their combat, I only have these few options. These must be the things I do, right? So, I can see your point, how maybe it's not. They were trying to strike a middle ground because that's the place where CR thrives. I don't know if the design hit it. I can definitely see where you're coming from there.
Thank you very much for chatting with me again, Air. I hope
no problem.
I hope
Always
that after our last two episodes, we still have people watching.
Here, just allow me. Blades in the Dark, you suck. D&D, you suck. Call of Cthulhu, you double suck.
Stop, shut
up. 13th Age, garbage, trash. Pathfinder.
No.
Find me a path away from you. You stink.
Actually, that one's kind of legit, though.
I think that's it. I've named every tabletop role-playing game that exists. You know what?
Perfect.
Fuck you, Lasers and Feelings.
You pissed off all the others by forgetting they exist. So that's genius.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Hey, that was that. Listen, that's that strategic, tactical. You don't want me at your table. Boy, howdy.
I'm just gonna put a long beep over everything you just said. We can't keep doing that.
but don't beat Pathfinder.
Yeah, I'm gonna unbeat Pathfinder, and I'm gonna beep everything else. And
Yes.
thank you so much for talking to me and ruining my career. I always knew it was
What
gonna
I'm
be
here
you.
for. You always knew I was the anchor to drag you down to the doldrums of YouTube obscurity.
I mean, we're already in obscurity. You're dragging me out of obscurity. You're dragging me even further.
You can have less subscribers. Don't you worry.
It's true. Goodbye.
Bye.